welcome back to the Security Conversations podcast. A guest that needs no introduction. Shane Huntley is the director of Google's Threat Analysis Group, TAG. First of all, what is TAG and what do you do over there?
Thanks, Ryan. So Google's Threat Analysis Group is the part of Google that looks into serious threat actors coming against Google and our users and disrupts them to try and keep users safe. So we've been doing this for about 12 years, and we look at a range of different threat actors. Government-backed threat actors are a huge part of our work. We've also expanded into looking at disinformation threat actors and also serious cybercrime because they're a growing threat for us as well. But our job is to sort of really understand the enemy and then do something about it.
And who is the enemy? Anyone doing anything malicious against Google users? Anyone doing anything malicious against the computing ecosystem that you touch? Help me understand, specifically what is the TAG mission and focus? And in a little bit, how does it differ from what Project Zero is doing and some of the other security units coming out of Google? Where is the separation there?
Yeah, so I think at Google, organization charts are more of a guidance than a hard barrier anyway. But I suppose what we really focus on is kind of understanding the people that could come against our users and understanding how it can really affect our products and how we can, and also the places where we can do something about it. It's sort of like a moot point to a little degree about what the difference is between the entire ecosystem and Google users, because there's not that many people who don't use Google in some form. So really to secure Google users, you have to kind of secure the entire internet.
Now I was going to say, where do people see your work? Where is the output? Where's the final output for the average end user one, or for enterprise, or the people you're protecting? Where do they see it, or do they even see it? Is it a lot of magic in the background protecting them before they even know?
Yeah.
Help me understand where TAG fits.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of missions here. What we use of our understanding kind of tries to protect users in a number of ways, right? So Google was formed in 2010, just after Google had the Aurora incident from China, where Google itself was targeted by Chinese government.
So TAG was formed as a result of the Aurora hack.
Yes, it was formed directly after that, and really kind of formed out of the incident response and the threat work that was being done during Aurora. So that was our biggest goal. When I joined TAG at that early date in 2010, just after Aurora, that was our number one goal. It still is, right? Stop Google getting hacked by government actors, and that still is our sort of number one mission. But over time, we sort of expanded that mission as well, because we can't just defend against Google itself getting hacked against these actors. We also see these actors coming after our users on Gmail and other platforms. We also see them doing disinformation. We also see the wider ecosystem. There's Android. So we really have expanded out this sort of understanding of protections. So the places you see this protection is for a long time, we were sort of behind the scenes, right? We do a bit more of this blogging and podcasting or whatever now to expose stuff, but we were sort of happy being in the background in the past, right? So our primary goal was to work out what the threat actors were doing and then build the protections. So and it's one of the advantages of being sort of a platform threat team like this. And sort of my goal isn't to I don't have to rely on writing some blog to get things fixed. If I see how the Iranian government is getting past the spam filters on Gmail, I work directly with the spam team to actually help get those blocks. And that's where most of our work's going, to actually get those direct protections in. We also have consumer-facing protections where we sort of do warnings, warning users they're the target of government-backed threats. We do some publishing of information. But we also do direct protections as well. There's actually things in my team where our knowledge and both the technical systems we build, but also the intelligence directly feeds into products to make sure that more attacks are blocked by Gmail, to make sure things are booted off the Play Store, and takedowns we're doing with YouTube around coordinated inauthentic behavior. So all of those things are a big range of stuff. When we did our planning session and looked at all the different outputs of TAG, it wasn't one or two things. It really went to a lot of different places in the company.
So you've got your solid long time background in this space, this kind of nation state type adversary things. Can we talk a little bit about your own background? Because you come out of an offensive security background as well. I mean, some of it might still be classified. Can you talk a little bit about your own entry into this? Did you join Google pre-TAG, or did you go and join Google because of TAG post Aurora? Help me understand your little bit of your background and how you made the the pathway into Silicon Valley?
Sure, sure. So, like, my background, like, I was a teenage hacker type, and always into this sort of security stuff from a very, very young age. I did some time in the Australian military, did some work in sort of like cyber intelligence and sort of like defensive projects there. But then for a while after I left the military, I worked in Australian intelligence, and I worked on the sort of cyber side of things.
What does that even mean? Like I work
I'm
for
trying to be careful
intelligence and the
here, right? I think
cyber things, the side
we're
of
being more open about that now, but like my title was the technical director of network exploitation technologies. So
right. No, no, I asked this because it's a weird thing, and just for conversation's sake, it's very strange how in the West and in the US here specifically, like we idolize you guys, the guys who come out of a military background and the guys who've put in time, doing these things. Yet, if you did this in another country and you're somehow, and in Israel, for instance, every startup comes out says they're Unity, the 200, the elite people. So people kind of glom onto this kind of association with .gov sector as a trophy to hold up. Do you view it that way?
That's a really interesting question. I think I don't.
Like I worked at Kaspersky years ago.
Yeah.
And you know the Kaspersky connection, right? It's like the Kaspersky controversy, right? It's like if you have any association at all with the government in the past, you're suddenly besmirched forever, but it doesn't affect us. Like, so how?
Yeah, it does sometimes, right? I think people often get tarred with different parts of things, right? So I think about this a lot when I've been building the team, actually. I think there is like great people that have a big variety of backgrounds. I think there are some very good people that have done government service and come from that place, and I think I bring some decent skills and have done all right here. But I don't think it's the only place to get that. I think actually one of the things I've tried to do very much building Tag is actually to try and bring a range of people. So I've got people from not just sort of Western intelligence. There's actually a very few of us overall compared to most threat teams, but bringing in like new graduates, people from an engineering background, people from a range of countries, and Tag.
How big is Tag?
Tag's about 50 people, and we're spread across
Okay.
a presence US, Canada, and Zurich, and in Switzerland as our primary locations, but expanding to Australia later in the year.
Yeah, I bring that up because it feels like there's a lot of security researchers doing offensive work for governments in legitimate places, counter terrorism in some crazy places. We've also had the story recently about ex-NSA hackers who ended up in Dubai and then they ended up getting punished. And so I'm just curious, when you're hiring people and you're building a team and so on, are those types of folks like red flaggish? Are you thinking along the lines of like ethics and perils? Because we're now threat intel brokers, right? Like you're the threat intel guy. You're an information broker. You're like a fourth party collector playing in this game anywhere, right? Do you worry about the ethics and perils of that stuff at all?
I think ethics is a huge part of this, and we always have to focus very much on the ethical side of things. And I think part of hiring anybody and like finding who's a good fit for the team is also very much about sort of like making sure that their ethics are aligned with what we're trying to do, that you're hiring people that you can trust, and also that from a point of view of like what they want to do is in like conjunction with what the team needs to do. So there's many people that aren't a great fit for Tag, but like I hire people that I feel I can trust, that are able to do this mission and are signed on to this mission, right? And I believe in our mission, right? I'm not saying it's the only mission, but our mission of actually defending this stuff and trying to make things safer by killing exploits and actually countering all these threats, I think is a valid mission, even if it's other people have other missions and other ways of seeing it.
From 2009, the creation of Tag, to now, how have you seen like I hate to use the word evolution, but like this gradual visibility into nation state operations? We know a lot more than we knew back then. Aurora was the singular event that made everyone like, hair and the neck stand up. Today, there's 5 reports every week on APT activity hitting big companies, right? So volume seems to have increased, visibility seems to have increased. We'll have a conversation about like zero-day discovery in the wild and why we're better at that. But when you looked at like your career in Tag over the years, because you're more connected and you have the telemetry to really tell us where we're going, have things gotten better? Have things gotten progressively worse? Where are we in the ecosystem as like our ability to defend ourselves from these apex adversaries?
Wow, there's a lot there. I'd say there's been a constant evolution, right? So I think when Aurora came out, it was a really big deal that sort of Google actually said that they had the incident, and there was 20 other companies, and not a single other one came forward there at that time too. So like at that time, this was all hush hush, and we weren't talking about it, and actors were able to do whatever they want because everyone was like too scared to talk about it. So
Right.
now,
There
like
used to
we've
be a
gone through this
throwaway line
evolution, and
about
like
like some targeted attack happening. It's like limited targeted attacks we've seen. That was the extent of what would be an APT report back in the day, right?
yeah. And it's like, but then it's evolved over time, and people when Tag started were going like, why does Google have a team that like is looking at government-backed threats? And like we get questions on that. But now fast forward to 2022, like my biggest question is Google doing enough against government-backed threats? We should be doing more about this. So we have seen this evolution of the defensive side has become more in the open. As to whether we're actually doing better against it, I think we are, but I think this is a cat and mouse game too, right? The attackers are also getting better. We've also seen this publicity, and everybody's seeing how successful this is from the big actors, is causing this sort of like other countries getting into it. Like if you look at a map of the world, which we have about which countries we've seen threat activity from, there's not that many countries that don't have at least one entry in our database now. So we are seeing this go down to more and more different countries, and also more agencies within countries. And we're also seeing this troubling sort of like commodification of, companies selling this capability as to sort of, in some cases, repressive regimes, or
Yeah, I want to get
don't
into
want to have
that
these
as well.
capabilities doing this. And that's one of the biggest concerns.
I want to get into the private sector offensive actors and some of the work you've done there. Not only just raising visibility and so on, but you guys are involved in court cases. I mean, going the legal route as well to try to respond to that type of stuff. When you talked a little bit about the map expanding, in the beginning, it used to be the big powers had a cyber operations, and we kind of knew who they were, and the reports, you would read a report and you would kind of automatically could make that link. When you start to see this map expanding and you see APT activity in Latin America, in parts of Africa, in parts of the world where it's strange, where are the strangest places that surprise you the most to see kind of like focused, targeted APT activity? Can you give me a sense of some places that it's really, really fascinating and interesting, comes out of the blue? And where are you seeing like interesting trends on that side?
So I suppose the facts that when we talked publicly before, that like the fact that Vietnam, in terms of where people are targeted, makes number two, and a lot of that comes down to the Ocean Lotus, like is interesting. I think the one that personally, and more for like funny reasons, is because we had this big map, and then we had this like big white bit in the middle of Asia from Mongolia. It was just totally white because we had nothing there. But I think we discovered like one tiny bit of activity from like one or two policemen doing some fishing or something like that. So I got to fill in their map. So you can kind of fill this in that even Mongolia is doing this to some degree. That like somebody somewhere, anybody who has some intelligence or police or other goals is doing something in cyber now. And I think that's part of it. So there's this whole variation of capability, and it's not all about who has the sexiest exploits and who has the sexiest things, right? Like most,
None of that doesn't matter in the grand scheme. It really doesn't matter if the victim becomes a victim, right?
yeah, like you only measure somebody by their success at reaching their goals, right? Like, and even the top threat actors, like the Russian ones, got a lot of good stuff in 2016 via phishing, right? So if you can achieve your goals by sending dumb phishing messages, like that doesn't make you a less effective hacker than somebody not achieving their goals via like really cool firmware or baseband exploits.
Let me ask you a strange, hard question. Is it ever appropriate for a government to have a cyber operation, a cyber malware operation, in your mind? I mean, are there cases where you can say legitimate use case?
I think I think especially if someone coming from this intelligence background, right? I'd say that intelligence collection is a valid function of government, right? So I think governments have kind of agreed it's one of the oldest professions ever is intelligence collection. So you definitely see that intelligence collection isn't in its own right immoral. That does not mean, however, that sort of like they should get a free pass from anybody whose job it is to defend against them. So the spies are going to spy, but my job is to secure Google users and to sort of like make a more secure ecosystem. I do think we need to balance this very carefully. I think there's some very arguments at the moment on equity sort of stuff at the moment. Like,
Yeah, it's a very nuanced
yeah.
conversation. I don't want to put you on the spot into kind of putting your head on a block for
No,
which is
no,
legitimate and which
I
is not. But the conversations around like targeting pedophiles and police having access to things to go after counterterrorism operations. I mean, there are a nuance to the conversation about legitimacy,
yeah,
right?
I suppose that like my biggest concern with that, which I'd say, and I'm happy to put my head on the block here, is that some of these arguments come down to wanting to make things less secure because of these cases, right? And I can tell you when I look across the ecosystem, when I see what's happening, when I see the threats we're facing in government, everywhere else, like I think they're the only people saying that the world is too secure at the moment and we need to make it less secure. Like I honestly think like there is
You're
more
talking
to be
you're talking
gained
about
by
the encryption debate.
sorry.
Are you talking about just the encryption debate and that whole kind
Yeah, I
of
think about encryption debate. I think
weakening?
about vulnerabilities equity process, about how many exploits people are keeping. I think it's actually wider than that. So, and it comes down to even how much the government invests in their offensive side of NSA versus the defensive side. Like, I'm not the expert, but that balance should be a real debate about: do we get more out of having better offensive capability as a country, or are we so vulnerable that at the moment we really need to prioritize more on defense? And I hope those conversations are happening and being done very thoughtfully.
And the addendum to that question is it ever appropriate for an anti-malware vendor or some sort of defensive technology unit to turn a blind eye, whitelist things that in their mind might be legitimate and ethical? Because it's just that's the additional question to is, oh, these are friendlies, so we can maybe not detect or maybe whitelist. There's that level of the conversation. Where do you stand there? Are you in the firm defenders must defend everything camp?
I think I think we have to play our correct roles here, right? So like my job is to build secure products, so and say on Chrome or anyone else, right? Like I think it would be incredibly dangerous and the wrong thing to do to start like whitelisting people or allowing them to do things, right? So like if we see that there is like a vulnerability and we know there's a vulnerability in something, then I think we have to get it fixed, right? So they can make their own decisions, but I don't think there's any way we could stand by and say, oh, we're not going to patch, we're going to leave this hole open, because especially because it never really stops with one actor anyway. Even if you like the actor that's currently exploiting this vulnerability and hole, what we see is that these things actually evolve. And if you don't fix the vulnerability, you don't fix the technique, you don't do the protections now when it's the, you know, quote unquote good actor, then you're going to go see it down the track until eventually you have like ransomware operators doing big destructive attacks from something you didn't fix earlier on. So that's why I think we do need to get there quickly and sort of like fix ahead of time. And this is a good force two to encourage that people actually, if they are going to do these activities, do it well and to increase the costs. I want this to be not easy for people to do.
Right. Here's a weird question. How do you like wake up for work, getting ready to motivate and energize your team to go do this work in a framework where it feels defeatist? I'll tell you why. Like assume breach is a normal part of a security program. Like everyone should assume they're compromised and go hunting. Like that's the status quo. People like you say, hey, if you haven't found an APT in your network, it's because you haven't looked hard enough, right?
I
It's
don't think
like
I've ever said that.
this no, no. I mean that this is the security expert advice. I'm not when I say people like you. I mean like in our industry, we kind of normalize that mindset of like, listen, you're already compromised. Everything is owned. Like just go hunting and try to do some defense and try to do blocking and tackling. The reality is there's a lot of nuance there, but the reality is everyone is on. Like there's a ransomware epidemic, there's nation state reports popping every day, there's compromise. Like how do you wake up and get energized to do this in this world where it just feels like you're just kind of chasing our tails? Is that fair?
I a little bit, but not really, right? So I'm actually against some of this security defeatism, right? So like I think it is true to say that like, if you have like the biggest nation states in the world coming after you, they're able to like, and they're willing to put infinite resources, they're always willing to do something against you, right? But like what I've seen day in, day out is like, sometimes I think we lionize attackers and we actually say that they are much better than they are. And if you see of how they're getting through, you see that they can be stopped, right? And day in, day out, we
They're
actually
not being
see attacks
stopped.
a lot.
But Shane, they're not being stopped. That's the thing. The reality is they're not being stopped. I mean, you talk about the expansion of APT activity to places where you don't need 0 days. And we talk about 0 day discovery being better, and we are amazing at catching 0 day. It's not even
I
relevant.
think I disagree. Like I believe, like, and I see it day in, day out that we are stopping attacks, right? We are seeing that, attacks that used to work don't. We see many, like the vast majority of the attacks coming against, say, Gmail users are actually blocked, and we actually do block them getting phished, and they are not compromised, right? So it isn't nearly as bad as you're making out here too, right? Like, and some of these basic protections, like, security keys, advanced protections, things we're doing behind the scenes, actually are doing a real level of security. Just because there is, like, some 0 day activity and some people being compromised here isn't a reason to say that they're like everything is broken. There's no point trying. Don't even bother. Just assume everything's compromised, because I think we're seeing
Wait,
a fairly big range of outcomes here.
when the CEO of SolarWinds gets up on stage and says, "Listen, it's assumed breach. Like, if you have to assume you're compromised," it feels not necessarily defeatist, but it feels like we're in this. Like, this is the reality.
Yeah, and I think
This
there's
is
a
reality.
difference
And I know
between
you
assuming.
talk. I mean, like you mentioned Google hardware protection keys, and you mentioned some of the Gmail work and stuff that you do. Amazing work, but it's for the 1%, right? I mean, I look at your own multi-factor adoption numbers in Google, and the numbers are small. I look at Microsoft's MFA numbers; they're tiny. I look at Twitter's; they're tiny. Like, what you're talking about is for a subset of people who are advanced in their mindset about protecting things. Let me finish. I'm arguing that the majority of enterprises, especially mid-market and small businesses, are sitting ducks. And it's just a reality of spending a lot for very little and assuming compromise. Is that fair?
It's a lot there. So yeah, and I agree. And like, I think that getting things done via pushing consumers is a great thing to do, but isn't actually our biggest focus. That's one of the reasons we try and do these protections behind the scenes, and we try and make things secure by default. No, I think, don't get me wrong, I am not making the case that, like, everything is great and that, like, that we aren't in a real sort of, like, world of hurt at present. What I'm saying is that I don't think it is. I don't think it is help. It is not help. I don't think we're helpless. I think we're able to do something about it, and I think doing things actually matters. And I think that it's actually, in some ways, it's actually good, because the actual average state of a lot of places is actually, you know, pretty damn bad. Like, I've actually had a lot of my, like, peers. I've actually had, like, friends and peers become the CISOs of companies. So what they turn up and they work out, like, you know what? There's actually a lot of basics we can do and actually increase security a lot. So I think we should,
Right.
like, so there's two ways of looking. You can be a pessimist and say everything's terrible because, like, we haven't sorted this out and we've got all these vendors selling solutions that don't work. But on the flip side, you can say, like, wow, we've actually can actually increase security a lot if we do some basic stuff and get at it, do protections and work at this. So if you ask me how I'm motivated,
Right.
that's how I see it. Is I do feel we can do something about it. We can't win totally, but it's not pointless either.
What are you most proud of in terms of delivery out of tag? Is there a specific thing that you hold up and say, you know what, this is my biggest, or this has been our biggest contribution to securing the ecosystem? And then I'll ask you, what are you least proud of? Like, what do you expect? Did you expect to deliver by now that you still think, wow, we're still struggling to get this right?
Yeah, I think the questions are related. I think, I think some of the biggest things I'm most proud of, like, I'm proud of the team. I'm proud of what we've built. I'm proud that, like, we are able to fix and block things. I'm proud that, like, protections we're rolling out around elections and detecting, and that we are part of the conversation and we are pushing forward security. Like, so I am proud on a day-to-day basis we're doing that. I suppose the part I'm sort of disappointed about, I'm sort of disappointed in general, not just us, but about the industry in general, about ties to this last conversation a little bit about how we're almost becoming blasé about it. That we're also coming about it's turning into something that we just talk about a lot at conferences and on blog posts, and it's just becoming a topic of endless discussion versus the how do we actually push past this. Like, when we started out, we're sort of hoping that when we shined a light on things with Aurora and elsewhere, that this would actually have some big effect on the ecosystem and actually cause a lot of pain for the adversaries. What we're seeing now is that the same actors that are getting blogged about and talked about in conferences are still operating with relative impunity year over year. So that sort of shows we're not going to solve this solely through like blog posts and conference talks.
Speaking of actors operating with impunity, 2021 was in my mind a banner year for zero-day discoveries, because I think they've always been this number of zero days happening. We just as an industry suddenly discovered 82 in the wild zero days in 2021, if you count Axelion and all the other things. I know Project Zero tracks some other, like the bigger ones in some other places. Are we better at finding them, or is the volume just increasing, or is that expansion of adversaries across the globe adding to this? Where do you think? Why so much sudden surge in zero-day activity?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I think it's both actually. So I think there's more people hunting for them, and there's more people producing them. So I do think there's some.
It's big business too. That's threat intelligence business is big business. The business of creating reports and selling feeds and so on. So I mean, there's a big financial incentive to put more eyeballs at it, right?
There is, and there's also, but I don't think it's only about that too, right? And I don't think that's the biggest drive from many people doing it. It's also one of the more interesting parts, to be honest. Like actually hunting zero day is actually a lot more interesting than hunting fishing. I'm sorry to say. So that's one of the reasons we find it's also more interesting to talk about. I think Maddie Stone, like my colleagues from Project Zero, have spoken on this a fair bit. But like, there's also other sides of like part of it is also that exploits are getting harder and actually getting patched too, right? So like often, like many years ago, you could run around with a zero day and run around with it for years without it getting fixed, and then it wasn't found. These days, you actually, they only have a certain life. So that actually causes people to have to find more of them, and they actually get burnt and discovered. So that causes some churn. You also need a chain of exploits too, right? So to actually do a browser exploitation at the moment, it actually is often a sequence of exploits to escape from the renderer process to like then escape the sandbox and then maybe another stage. So there's more exploits to that, and there's also just changes in the ecosystem, right? So that like you went from, and it's also like like early when I started, like it was often Word, PDF, and Flash exploits, and none of those were particularly hard, and they were fairly universally applicable. Now you're having to have very complex browser chains. I used to be an exploit guy, but when I look at modern exploits, they like blow my mind about like what people have to do these days. So I think it's a combination of all those things, but also I think the market has to be growing, right? There are people that are buying exploits, buying capabilities from vendors, and that market is actually creating the demand from great researchers, unfortunately, going into the market of finding zero days to give to repressive regimes so they can do their thing. And that's how the market is kind of being rewarding at present. And I think we can change that, I hope.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you bring up exploitation. I used to go to Pwn2Own in the early days when Dino would use, or Charlie would use a single Safari exploit to take over a MacBook. Today, you go to Pwn2Own, it's 5 exploits chained together with 5 vulnerabilities jumping out the sandbox here and there. Here's the reality, though. Every machine falls, right? It still happens. That's where the nuance of the conversation gets. You get into this, are you a pessimist or an optimist? Because at the end of the day, the outcomes are the same. Guys are still winning Pwn2Own at alarming rates. You go to Tianfu Cup in China, like the level of exploitation there is through the roof, but the outcomes are still the same. So have we gotten any better?
Not nearly better enough. So like, that's one of the things when I spoke at OffensiveCon, like as the sort of like enemy in the gates of being the sort of like the one defensive guy and talking at OffensiveCon. I encourage people, like I totally believe we need to be investing more into fundamentally making software more secure. And I think there are some efforts there of like Fuchsia, there's people looking at like Rust, but like, yeah, we just got to stop doing the same thing over and over again. And I think this needs to be a much bigger global push, because I agree that like we are seeing, many of the same sort of issues of type confusion and various like, memory corruption.
It's the same memory corruption issues over and over again, including at your own shop. I mean, you look at the Chrome patch, you look at a batch of Chrome patches every week. It's like 90% of it is memory corruption issues that are just continuing to haunt code bases, right?
Yeah, I think it's across the board, right? So we have to. I think we have to work out a way to build more secure software at some point, and we have to work out how to incentivize those trade-offs. because that's the challenge. But again, like I don't be totally pessimistic, and there's also because there are also other things coming too, right? I think some of the protections built into silicon. I think some of the efforts of like making it harder to deploy as well. That's actually one of the things we want to do with this finding of exploits. Is we want to make it that you have to be very careful when you're using your zero days, because if you're not careful, then somebody like Tag, Project Zero, or many other teams are going to find and get your exploits patched very quickly. And I think making it so attackers have to be a lot more careful will slow them down and lets people be compromised. So it's all a matter of like not extremes, but about trying to make people as secure as possible and to minimize the sort of like exposure here to these threats.
And impose cost on adversary. I mean, that's the biggest part of it, is imposing cost, burning their 0 days, killing their bugs, that kind of thing, imposing additional costs. Because you're never going to get rid of them. They're too resourceful and their missions are too important, especially at the nation state level. I want to ask about sharing of IOCs, because I know this is it's a hot button topic on Twitter, and Tag gets brought up in this a lot. Talk a little bit about like what's your policy around IOC sharing and when IOCs get released, when samples get released. Because I have examples of places where, you told me as a let's say I'm a Google user or someone in the industry, hey, there's a guy walking through your neighborhood. He's got a fancy key that could pop every door in your neighborhood. Good luck. Like, that's how I feel when you don't tell me who the guy is, what is he looking to steal? Am I a potential target? Help me understand.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things here, right? One is that like you see we've been becoming more forward leaning on this as well. But like I have a core principle on this, right? So like my goal is to work out what actually protects people the most, not what is going to make the Twitter pundits happy, not what is going to make the threat intel industry people happy, but what actually protects people. And this is a constant trade-off, right? Like we actually are a real intelligence team, so we have to balance. Okay, like we could produce a whole bunch more details now of exactly how we found this, but then it's going to make it a lot harder to find the next one. We also have the issue when like an exploit is brand new, that we know if we do too many details too early, then suddenly, we've seen this as like other threat actors are going to immediately be trying to like reproduce or take or get a copy of this exploit and then start throwing it around. So we always don't want to make
these are operational OPSEC decisions that you're making in real time to kind of limit what you're putting out there publicly in the early days and so on. Understandable.
Yeah. And then on the other side, I see like what is actually useful too, right? Like, so if we find something and we know it was sent to like, or we know it was a small number of users and it was targeting like a specific, group of activists or whatever. And, we've taken it down in safe browsing, we've got the thing patched, whatever. So just like producing exactly, and it was, taken down, it's not there anymore, it's not a valid IOC. Like how useful is that? The specific details, not necessarily as useful as some people make out, but we're always making that out.
If I'm a CISO, right, but if I'm the CISO of the security program and my company is potentially might be exposed there, and I want to go do some retro hunting to see if this thing may have been in my organization, and you can't help me. You tell me that a guy is like, if I'm an aerospace guy, you tell me these guys are interested in aerospace and so on. I'm in that victim profile, and then I'm kind of sitting around. There is no sample. There's no data from you to help me go hunting, and now I feel like, and that's the argument. Yeah. I feel like you left me in this kind of...
Yeah, and I think you'll see now that we do a lot more IOCs. We are doing a lot more. We have come a long way in this. But again, it's just the trade-offs I talked about, right? And we try and do that. We also do a lot more, specifically, we reach out a lot to specific targets as well. So, and we do a lot behind the scenes and a lot in trusted forms too. So just because somebody, sometimes we have to work with...
That you do agree that you can do better.
I think I think everybody can do better at anything. But yes, I think we can do better at this. I do think, and I think we are getting better at this, and we will continue to get better at this, and we're investing more into it. Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about...
Pretending we're perfect on this topic.
No, it's okay. I don't want to pick a fight with you. It's like I can't have Shane on the podcast and not ask about release of IOCs, because this is a running thing. Whenever you guys on Project Zero put out blog posts, I mean, the Uyghur stuff, it was kind of, even the forced entry stuff, like there isn't a sample available outside of what Google might have or the Citizen Lab people might have. And the rest of us feel like we're in the dark. So it's just a
Yeah,
conversation
that's
piece.
totally understood. We'll try and do more. Don't always assume we don't always have details too, right? Sometimes we're getting criticized of like sometimes we know what we know. Like we I think we're damn good at what we
Just
do, but yeah.
more data to help the rest of us go hunting. That's all. I mean, I don't think that's like a
I'll
ridiculous
take the request
ask.
back to the team. Yeah.
I want to ask about private sector offensive actors before I let you go, because your team has put in a lot of work into kind of tracking. The big one, obviously, is NSO Group, and there's lawsuits and so on happening there. But there's also a bunch of others in the Israeli ecosystem, including here in the West, including in the US and so on. How do you view that? You mentioned it earlier, but how do you view that industry? Is it expanding? Has the NSO noise and drama kind of put things on pause? Help me understand what you know about this ecosystem, and not only in Israel, but here in the US, where there have been names called as well.
Yeah, I think I don't think this industry is like, collapsing in any way so far, unfortunately. Well, I do.
It's profitable,
It's
right?
yeah, it's very profitable, right? If you look at some of the numbers, like I still almost can't believe some of the numbers about, like how much it's advanced. If you look back to say things like 10 years ago with the Finfisher people who are apparently now bankrupt, like they were talking about like millions of dollars, and you start looking at some of the fairly big numbers of NSO. This is incredibly profitable industry, so I don't think you're going to shut it down. I think the pressure will make things harder, and I think we're starting along that path. But the moment, I'd say what we're seeing more is sort of like reforming, people shifting around. I will say on these ecosystems are actually very complicated, and it's true on for the Indian hacker for hire stuff too, right? Like it's hard to draw a line between these companies and people as they move around, as they reform, they do new entities. And I think that's same of the are you tracking the individuals as they move from company to company or the actual underlying actors? And that's actually quite difficult. So um, I don't think it's going away. I think the pressure is increasing, and I think that it's going to become tougher to operate. And what I've told other people as well is that like I'd be wary of getting into this industry if you're a hacker. It might pay well in the short term, but like I think what we're seeing at the moment with like indictments, with like further pressure, and what it looks like on your resume, I would encourage any of the listeners to think very carefully before pursuing this as a profession.
Yeah, and it's really interesting space, because I feel like, again, it ties back to the earlier argument about where places people feel that this is legitimate use of code to go after certain types of targets. So like, there's a certain mentality thing
Yeah, but
there.
there's also a lot of
You're
illegitimate
saying
use
this
cases we're
doesn't.
seeing as well, right? Like, these actors are
Oh,
claiming that it's all
100%.
going after terrorists or whatever, but then, again and again, people like Citizen Lab are exposing that, like, their targeting goes well beyond what, like, I think the society would agree is useful use of this technology.
Let me close on this, Shane. You and I are going to have this conversation again in a year, 1 year from today. Do you see things better? Do you see things status quo, or are you like me that thinks everything is just it's a lost cause and we're just chasing our tails?
I think some things will be better. I don't think everything will be better, but I think you'll be able to look back in 12 months' time and say that certain things have certainly got better and certain actors were disrupted. I do think you'll have a whole bunch new exciting incidents and a whole bunch of bad things that went wrong that shouldn't have gone wrong and things we could have done better as well. I'm not going to solve it in the year, but I think some bits will have gone better.
Can I ask quickly? I know I mentioned that was the last question, but North Korea. North Korea, Chrome days, targeting security researchers using fake pen test type companies. You guys have been very, very closely tracking them. There's a certain mindset around North Korea, no skills, like unsophisticated actor going after cryptocurrency people. What is real as it relates to the strength, the posture of the North Korean threat actor ecosystem? Are they to be taken seriously? Are we, like, help me
It
understand?
absolutely should be taken seriously, right? Like people think about this like, oh yeah, North Korea can't do that or whatever and undermine them, right? But like doing this hacking stuff and doing this hacking stuff is not that hard, right? Getting people together, like and who are like some smart college age kids and like putting on pen testing training, learning these technical things, like that's all you need to build one of these capabilities, right? And I joke that like building an APT capability is not rocket science. And North Korea has rocket science, right? Like these people can build intercontinental
True.
ballistic missiles and like nuclear weapons, but we're surprised that they can do pen
Right.
testing and hacking type stuff. Like it's not that surprising. It's not that hard to do this hacking stuff, unfortunately. So yeah, they definitely are a serious actor, and they're very prolific. And going all the way back to the Sony hack, they are also reckless in what they do, right? So in some ways, they're a more scary actor because they don't have the restraint that some of the more mature powers do. So I think everybody should be taking North Korea very serious in this space.
All right, Shane, I'll leave it there. That's 40 minutes of strong, strong content. Thank you very much for coming on, sharing your expertise. And in exactly a year, come back. Let's see if the pessimist in me gets changed. I hope
I
so.
hope so too. So been lots of fun. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Shane.